You're listening to Unmuted Love. Hi there, I'm C. Ushelman, and with 35 years as a marriage and family therapist and 25 years as a parent of 2 children I brought home from the foster care system, I want to welcome you here to Unmuted Love Podcast, the one place where nothing is off limits to say out loud about parenting children from difficult beginnings.
Stop for a minute, stop and breathe for a minute, long it over your head, try to listen instead, won't you? Think for a minute, who you wanna be for a minute, don't get over your head, you're like everyone else, aren't you?
Sometimes it's real sweet around here, and sometimes it ain't so pretty, because this is 100% Unmuted Love. So let's go.
You'll be just
Welcome, parents. Welcome to Unmuted Love. So happy you're here today. Let's start with a nice, refreshing, clear breath. Take a big breath in your nose, hold it at the top, and exhale your mouth. Nice. Let's do it again. Big breath through your nose, hold it at the top, exhale through your mouth. I'm feeling kind of basic today, and I'm going to end our podcast season 1 with the basics of therapeutic parenting, right? The 6 A's. That's what I like to call it. And of course, I probably could have come up with the 6 B's or the 6 C's, but I'm going with A's right now. So hopefully it'll make sense to you when I get it all out here. But let's go ahead and start by saying what the 6 A's are. So here we go. Attitude, acceptance, attunement, assessment, accommodation, and action. Here's the thing. If there's anything that we wish to change in the child, we should first examine it and see whether it's not something that could better be changed in ourselves. That happens to be a quote from Carl Jung. And I think that that is a great place to start. Now, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, that I do talk a lot about what parents can do for parents, because after all, that's the person you have control over. You don't have control over children. You don't have control over circumstances. You don't have control over anything. And sometimes you don't even have control over yourself. But if you're going to have any agency with anything, it's going to be with your own behavior. And so that's where we started in this podcast, and that's where we're going to finish. Start with attitude. Attitude, your attitude. Penelope Leach says, for a small child, there's no division between playing and learning, between the things he or she does just for fun and the things that are educational. The child learns while living, and any part of living that is enjoyable is also play. So I don't know how it happens that big people stop playing, but they do tend to stop playing at some point. And really, it's probably the downfall of adults in the first place, because we stop playing. If we played throughout our lifetimes, we'd probably live a lot longer. Work less, play more. So that's what I like to say about your attitude when you're thinking about your children. It's paying more attention to how you engage your child. That brings me to another acronym called PACE. PACE. And it's a good way to remember that your attitude matters the most. So what does PACE stand for? The P stands for playful. The A stands for accepting. The C stands for curious. And the E stands for empathic. This is Dan Hughes' model for engaging children, and I love it. It's from Dyadic Developmental Psychotherapy. It is how I engage all children, and it's really kind of how I engage most people. And it's really loving. And that's what I want to say, is that an attitude that's loving, that's playful, accepting, curious, and empathic, no matter what's going on, is going to help you the most. Your attitude, often I say, have a paceful attitude, right? Have a paceful, playful, accepting, curious, empathic attitude toward your child. Now, I'll do a whole nother podcast on how to really embrace pace. But if you've heard that before from me, then you know it. And if you haven't heard it yet, you'll get it. So it's coming. But it's pretty basic on the face of it. In terms of practice, it might be a little more complex, but I don't think so. I think it's one of the simple ways to remember the attitude with which to parent children from difficult beginnings or any other beginning. The second A is acceptance. And I think radical acceptance is everything. I really do. Marsha Linehan says radical acceptance rests on letting go of the illusion of control and a willingness to notice and accept things as they are right now without judging. I'm going to read it again. Radical acceptance rests on letting go of the illusion of control and a willingness to notice and accept things as they are right now without judging. That actually is quite hard, but it's beautiful in its simplicity, really. Your child from difficult beginnings is neurodiverse because of the trauma. Now, a lot of people want to argue about the term neurodiverse, like it can only apply to brains that are autistic or brains that have ADHD or some kind of organic in nature. But what we know about trauma is that it changes the DNA of your child and it changes the brain body complex. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis gets changed, it gets altered. And so your children from difficult beginnings are, by definition, neurodiverse. And it's really incumbent upon us parents to radically accept it, embrace that instead of insisting that our children are, quote, normal. Well, I actually think they are normal, but normal is much more inclusive if you think about it. So the way I like to think of neurodiverse is that it's very spiky, meaning sometimes everything's going smoothly, and sometimes it's really spiky and not very smooth. It helps if you see through a lens of neurodiversity because that's a certain kind of lens that allows for accommodation. It allows you to see that you need to parent the brain of your child in the moment that their brain is having that particular experience, whatever that is. So if you think all behavior is communication, and I think that, then it's really important to see the child through that lens. Like, what is the child trying to communicate to me? And accept that in this moment, they're trying to communicate something that may or may not go with the flow, that may or may not work with my agenda as a parent, but is definitely from where they are standing in their shoes, in that brain at that time. And so radical acceptance means accepting your child for who they are rather than who you wish they were. And in every moment, right? In this moment, who they are, and then the next moment and the next, rather than, well, he wasn't like this yesterday. Why is he like this today? That's not acceptance, right? That's questioning and resisting what is. Radical acceptance means this is my child. This is my child's brain. It's been impacted by some form of trauma, and I need to see through that lens so that I can parent the brain of my child and not just all this behavior, as though the behavior can be changed without changing the actual brain of the child, which is a whole different matter, right? Doesn't come down to behavioral interventions. It comes down to an experiential, relational change. That is completely different than behavior change. Keep that in mind because now we're going to the concept of attunement. That's number 3. Attunement is this kind of interesting thing. We think about it mostly with a baby and a mommy, right? The mommy and the baby are attuned to one another. Like mommy knows the cry of the baby's wet diaper, or when the baby's hungry, or when the baby's bored or wants to play or sleepy. Mommy is attuned to that cry, right? And there are all these different cries that mean different things. And that's a kind of attunement that says, if attunement could talk, it would say, I know that I know you, right? It's this kind of intersubjective communication that goes on between a parent and a child. It can go on between other people as well, but with a parent and a child, it's naturally attuned. Now, if you have an adopted child or a child that's come into your life from a different family, or a child who has experienced trauma, then the attunement may be out of sync with you. And so it's harder to have the I know that I know you feeling. But that has to be accomplished in the parent-child relationship for the child to experience felt safety. And felt safety is what we're aiming for when we're parenting children from difficult beginnings. We want them to feel safe, and that comes from attunement between the parent and the child. Attunement is the real language of love, the conduit by which the preverbal child can realize he or she is loved. Attunement is a subtle process. It's deeply instinctive, and it's easily subverted when the parent is stressed, depressed, or distracted. That's a quote from Gabor Mate. And I believe that in my bones, that when the parent is stressed, when the parent is depressed, when the parent is distracted, then that attunement becomes subverted and it gets out of sync, and then the child does not experience felt safety, which is paramount to feeling love, feeling safe, which leads to love, right? It's like you're either safe or you're unsafe. You're in love or you're in fear. What is it? That's for us to create in the lives of our children, is this way of being where they feel safe and like we know them deeply. I know that you know that I know you. This is a very big concept, and it's really important to think about when you're thinking about children from difficult beginnings, because they've gotten out of sync with anyone in their lives who have that kind of attunement. So attunement requires regulation on the parent's part for sure. You cannot attune when you're dysregulated with your child unless your child is dysregulated and then you meet them in an upregulated way as a matching sort of activity, but only because you're regulated and you can upregulate a little bit in order to bring them into regulation. Now that's a high level skill and I'm not going to teach it to you here, but I want you to know that it does exist. Regulation, though, in a parent requires optimal self-care. Self-care requires awareness on your part, parents. Self-acceptance, self-compassion, self-forgiveness all require time and attention for self-care. So you cannot go through life with a child from difficult beginnings who's easily upset and easily dysregulated and easily out of sorts if you become dysregulated every time they do. So keep that in mind, because attunement creates safety. But if you're too dysregulated to attune, then you're going to be a really unsafe piece of your child's life. That brings me to number 4, which is assessment. Assessment is about what's going on right now, assessing the situation, what's happening right now. What is my child's behavior communicating to me, and what's going on in me that I need to regulate? Life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain, right? It's about being in sync in what is. Whatever's happening right now, that's the thing to get in sync with, rather than resisting it or not going with it. If a child is melting down, instead of insisting the child stop melting down, it would be better to join the storm. Get down, get a little smaller, lean in a little bit. Hey, what's going on, bud? How can I help you? You're having a hard time. How can I support you right now? Would you like a hug? Do you need some space? What is it you need right now? Now, you maybe don't talk like that because that's like a lot of sentences, one, lots of questions, and that's not helpful necessarily. But I'm talking about the attitude of that. Get down, get slower, lean in, and be regulated so that your child can feel safe to regulate too. So let's just go through those questions one more time. Assessment means asking some questions. What's happening to my child right now? You don't have to ask the child necessarily, but you can assess what is happening. Are they hungry? Are they thirsty? Are they tired? Are they stressed out? Do they have a narrow bandwidth from going to school all week or all day, holding it all in, and now they get home and they've lost their minds? Asking yourself, what happened earlier in the day, in the week, in the month? Is this an anniversary of some kind? Is this a pattern? What time of year, situation, or happening is going on that may be triggering something that is outside the child's awareness, but might be inside your awareness because you live with this child every year in every situation in patterned events? So a lot of people, for example, come up against the holidays, and as soon as the fall starts to come, the weather starts to change, that signals the oncoming of holidays. And holidays often signal a lot of sadness in our kids who come from difficult beginnings, who have lost their biological parents. They have a lot of sadness and grief that they may or may not remember. But that doesn't mean their body doesn't remember. Often they do remember, and so they go through a cycle. But you have to be paying close attention to even notice what those cycles are. So that's what assessment means, paying attention to the small things in the child's life, but also the big things in the child's life, so that you can meet them where they're at instead of insisting they meet you where you're at. And now the 5th A, accommodate. Your child is having a hard time. Your child is not giving you a hard time. That's what accommodate means. It means stop seeing it as a problem that your child is giving you, but instead recognize that your child is struggling somehow. Live so that when your children think of love, fairness, integrity, and tenderness, they think of you. That quote always makes me just feel kind of mushy inside, because I wish that my children, my grown-up children, when they heard those words, love, fairness, integrity, and tenderness, they thought of me. Now I think they think love and integrity are me. But I don't know if they think fairness and tenderness, because I was pretty harsh with them when they were little, and those are the things they remember most. So when we're talking about accommodating the needs of our children, what we're looking at is taking their bandwidth into consideration before we decide that they're doing something wrong. What to accommodate? If our child is tired and therefore they're being grumpy, or they're melting down, or they won't do what they're supposed to do, then we think in terms of physical accommodation, like rest. They need more sleep. Their bandwidth is narrow. They need some food, maybe, or a snack, or they need some water, or they need some time to play, or they need some kind of sensory activity. Or if a child is emotionally thin in their bandwidth, we might think of they need more safety, more felt safety. They need some predictability and some structure. They need some co-regulation from us. They need to reduce their deprivation somehow. Somehow they're feeling like there's not enough. And they need more connection over correction. So when you're thinking about your child's behavior, think in terms of how can I accommodate my child rather than how can I change my child's behavior? Because changing your child's behavior when they have a narrow bandwidth is fairly futile. They cannot do it. And so what we can do is change our expectations, lower our expectations, lower the bar a little, lower our standard in that moment, and accept that this is what they can do right now. Sometimes it's not very much, and sometimes it's plenty. But we need to accommodate their bandwidth rather than requiring their bandwidth to accommodate the expectation we have, because it's not going to happen in that direction very easily. And so that helps you not flip your lid when you accommodate rather than you insist on your child accommodating you. A quote from Gandhi: "Power is of two kinds. One is obtained by the fear of punishment, and the other by acts of love. Power based on love is 1,000 times more effective and permanent than the one derived from fear of punishment." Now, this is important because in therapeutic parenting, we don't use punishment. We use limits. We use natural consequences. We use restorative justice, right? We allow the child to learn from their mistakes rather than punishing them to learn. So that brings me to number 6, action. Be the person you want your child to grow into. I think this is super important. Our kids are paying attention to everything that we do. A lot of times I hear children talking in just really mean ways to their parents, and I have heard the very same parents, when they're dysregulated, speak the same way to their child. It's out of the awareness of the parent, and so the parent is not realizing that they're being a model for their dysregulated child. So be the person you want your child to grow into with the actions that you do, not the words that you say. So where do we ever get the crazy idea that in order to make children do better, first we have to make them feel worse? Think of the last time you felt humiliated or treated unfairly. Did you feel like cooperating or doing better? That is a question asked by Jane Nelson, who is of the positive parenting ilk. And she's right about that. If someone punished me every time I made a mistake, well, I'd probably start lying to them, hiding from them. I'd probably just sort of collapse and I'm not going to try anything because I'm going to get punished. Be aware that children learn best from teaching, actual teaching, and from watching, and from being able to make their own mistakes. The actions we take really do matter. This is a place where I might often say to you that the tenets of something called TBRI, trust-based relational intervention, are good ones to think about. So the 3 tenets of trust-based relational intervention are empowerment, connection, and correction. Empowerment is about the environment the child's in, their body and their environment. Connection is about the attunement, playfulness, quality of the attachment that we talked about earlier. And correction being playful engagement, structured engagement, calming engagement, protective engagement, using simple things like repetitive scripts, or setting the bar low so the child can have a chance to succeed early. And then using restorative justice, like doing a kindness for somebody that has been harmed by your child in some way with words or in actions. Those kinds of tenets are from TBRI. I'm not going to go deeper into it here, but if you were interested in learning some deep and easy interventions for children to support their felt safety, then TBRI would be a great place for you to try it out. What is it that you'll take away from today, from the 6 A's of basic therapeutic parenting skills? What is it that you needed to hear today that you need to practice a little more of? You are the greatest healing agent in the lives of your children, and all you have to do is look at yourself for answers. Change yourself and your children will follow. Now, that's not 100%. Sometimes children have mental health difficulties. Sometimes children have very severe attachment challenge, in which case you can change yourself as much as you want and you may still have severe difficulties with your child. Always start with yourself first. If you haven't done your own work, it's not fair to blame the child or blame the child's mental health problems for why your family is not peaceful and loving. Change yourself first. It's incumbent upon us as parents to really think about our impact on children and our agency, right? We have a lot of power to affect change in the lives of these children if we just knew how. That's why I'm doing this podcast today and every day that I do it, is to help you realize that there are other ways to parent children from difficult beginnings that actually might turn them around, that actually might create felt safety in them so that they could feel more comfortable being in our families. They could be more responsible in our families. They could learn from us rather than fearing us. That's the goal of the basics of therapeutic parenting. So go out there and try one of the 6 A's. And if you were on a really great day, you could try all 6 A's and see how that goes. I'll be talking more about that in other episodes. Thanks for joining me today. I so love having you here, and I so appreciate that you have been sending me good wishes for the podcast and appreciation for the information. I love that, and I'm so happy that I'm doing it for you. So until we speak next time in our next season, remember, your love matters, and I'm here in unmuted love for you. Hey parents, this is C. Get the help you need to end destructive and chaotic behavior in your home while parenting children from difficult beginnings. I know you need help, and the Love Plus parenting model actually works. I'm inviting you to work with me personally for 6 months in my virtual therapeutic parent program, and I guarantee you results or 100% of your investment back. How is that for a blue ribbon deal? I'm looking forward to working with you. See you on the inside.
Stop for a minute. Stop and breathe for a minute. Long it over your head. Try to listen instead, won't you? Think for a minute. Who you want to be for a minute. Don't get over your head. You're like everyone else, aren't you? You could gain from being a bit nicer. Knowing to talk and when to shut your mouth.
The Unmuted Love podcast is hosted by me, C. Eshelman, attachment and trauma specialist at the Attach Place in Sacramento, California. Our podcast producer is the amazing Saya Clark, and our theme song is Nicer by Houses on the Hill, licensed through Epidemic Sound. Thank you for being such loyal listeners here on Unmuted Love. I'll see you all next week.
You'll be just fine.